city is back and it's exciting.
It's a fantastic film festival that really gets to the soul and the heart of downtown New York filmmaking.
It's about the vibrance of the culture of New York, and we pull it all together with films, games, immersive experience.
We share our narratives now differently.
There are so many more things that games can be.
Ever since I was a kid, I would play video games 24/7.
Every time I wanted to relax, every time I wanted to step out of the world for a bit.
You know, some people might say, well, go read a book. And I'm like, I don't want to read a book. I want to be in an interactive adventure. I want to feel like I'm part of the story.
I am Julián Cordero and my game is Despelote.
Goodbye Volcano High.
Stray Gods.
A Highland Song.
Chants of Senna.
Nightscape.
The Expanse.
Welcome.
Welcome to Tribeca Games.
I must have climbed the hill behind the house 100 times. I know every stone. But after that hill, there's another. And then another again. And after all that, then that's the sea. And I've never been there.
A Highland Song is a narrative adventure game set in the wilds of the Scottish Highlands. You play as Moira McKinnon, a teenager on her way to the sea for the first time. But to get there, you're going to have to find your way through the wild mountains and the valleys. You'll have to survive the weather, and you'll learn a bit about the stories and the history of the Highlands on the way.
Inkle is an independent game studio based in the UK, and we specialise in narrative games, so we make games in all sorts of genres, but our main focus is on games that tell really strong stories.
Our most famous game is probably 80 Days, an adaptation of Jules Verne's classic novel.
The main hook of 80 Days is that you can go around the world any way you like. The way that Highland Song works is extremely similar to 80 Days. You start in one particular point and you can choose all sorts of different routes through the Highlands in order to reach your goal. But it also ends at a single point because you're trying to reach the lighthouse where your Uncle Hamish lives by the sea.
Finding the right gameplay for a game like a Highland Song can be really difficult. Gameplay is usually built around loops and patterns, but good narratives aren't made out of loops. We want to make sure that the character isn't doing anything just for the sake of gameplay, but everything the character's doing has to make sense within the narrative.
So the reason that we've essentially created our very first platforming game is that it just makes sense for the character within this scenario to be jumping and scrambling over rocks. Woohoo! And it even has a rhythm action mechanic. So in many ways, it's the most gamey game that we've ever created.
Moira's platforming abilities in a Highland Song are quite realistic. She has a limited amount of time that she can climb. She gets hurt if she falls too far. She can rest to recover her strength. She gets affected by weather and affected by nighttime and affected by cold. A lot of our mechanics are built around the tension between knowing where you are and being lost. We have a map mechanic, which is all about that. It's about finding little pockets of knowledge, learning the names of peaks and understanding the history of the peaks to help you find your way through this world.
At Inkle, we've always loved hand-drawn 2D illustration. We love how expressive it can be, especially for characters. Even when we made 3D games, we still had 2D characters because we loved the overall effect. I grew up in Scotland. When I was a teenager, I went up into the Scottish Highlands with 3 friends and we got lost and we had to stumble through rivers and bogs. It was really quite a chilling, scary experience. My parents are art historians, and there was always one painting in particular that they had that I used to love as a child. It had a little ruined castle by a loch and these Scots pine trees and this golden brown colour palette that was just so characteristic of the region. And so going for a really painterly aesthetic was a way to capture that. The more modern take on that is the digital paintings of concept artists such as Paul Scott Canavan, who we worked with on this project. And he came up with this really beautiful way of hand painting rocks and trees and grass and then assembling them as a huge collage, but then all built up so that the overall effect is of a painting coming to life.
When people play a Highland song, I really want them to come away with a strong sense of the place, the Highlands themselves. There's this tension in that place between being full of story and history and the marks left behind by people, whether that's ruined farmhouses or whether that's just the names attached to the various peaks and the stories behind those names, which often go back a very, very long way indeed.
When I first kind of conceived of the game, I tried to forget everything about what games we'd made as a studio before, what games are out there, and I just tried to imagine, what do I want on my Switch for me to play right now? And pretty much a Highland song, as the way it looks and feels, popped into my head, and I can't be prouder of what we've created.
Co-op is a game studio that's based originally in Montreal but is now remote and worldwide. It is a cooperative.
Basically that means that we make all major decisions together. We decide whether we want to work 4 days or 5 days. Spoiler alert, we decided to do 4 days a long time ago.
We present concepts when we are starting to put together things, and we all vote on what we think is what everybody would like to work on.
And you feel more attached to what you're making because you voted for it, you chose it.
It was really important for us to feel like this was a different space where people actually could be the voices behind the games that we make.
We are the makers of some charming, fun games like Winding Worlds and Nog and the upcoming Goodbye Volcano High.
Goodbye Volcano High is a cinematic visual novel about dinosaurs in their final year of high school. At the start of the year, they find out that a meteor is coming. And the game is about asking yourself, what would you do if you had 1 year left? Who would you be? Who would you want to love? And how would you want to go out?
I vote yes.
I don't think this is a voting type situation.
I mean, it does kind of belong to all of us. Or it was supposed to.
It does. You did a great job.
So, what do you say, Fang?
We chose dinosaurs for Goodbye Volcano High for a couple of reasons.
Originally, when we presented the game to everybody else, it was meant to be a dating sim because, like, at the time, this was kind of like the hot thing to work on was dating sims. And then we were like, hold up. Here's the hook. It's a dating sim with dinosaurs at the end of the world. As soon as you start talking about a meteor, even though the characters are unsure what's going to happen, you know what's going to happen.
And that was really important to us because we wanted to make something that could tap into the anxiety of our current times. And dinosaurs was a really great way to create that metaphor instantly.
As it went on and we became kind of more ambitious and more interested in making what we actually like, we were like, what if it's an anime and we tell a story that isn't necessarily so focused on dating, but really goes deep into the emotional aspects of the end of the world.
So high school already feels like it's the end of the world to most people, so it wasn't really that hard to hone in on the teen angst. It's really the hope that's tricky to encapsulate.
High school to me is all about that sweet, sweet balance of doom and hope.
Hope for the better future, hope for the dreams we chase and the ambitions we strive for. Those are things that can feel impossible to cling to, especially with something that can't be stopped and feels inevitable, like a giant meteor hitting you.
And communities all across the continent reacted to the news of a previously unknown space object this morning.
So, how do you deal with that?
It starts off very joking. They're kind of making gallows humor jokes.
In light of the whole space rock potential demise of civilization thing, my chosen theme feels off.
What's the theme?
Using this year to, make an impact?
Our characters all have different methods of coping. Some double down on their ambitions, determined to accomplish their dreams before it's too late. Others slow down and decide to savor what time they have left, regardless of what their dreams are.
We can still win! Battle of the Bands! Asteroid or not!
The player character essentially ends up being the UI, and you end up playing as Fang's inner monologue.
I think this means she's rooting for us?
Music is really important in Goodbye Volcano High, and I would actually say music is really important to our studio and all of our games. It's core to our DNA, and music is central to the identity of the people who make the game, and so it is central to the identity of the game itself and the characters within it.
There's no performance in this game that is separate from the narrative. It is essentially the same as having a scene of dialogue, but you're playing music.
We never climbed, we never fell. We scaled our way out of this water well.
Fang is kind of gearing up for their future as a musician, and then realizing that they may not have a future anymore. So those two things are kind of clashing in their brain for the music they're creating and singing in the game.
I think every person hopes that they get to be near people they love and who understand them and that love them. Those are things people can grasp no matter how much time they have left.
I think that this game really encourages people to be brave, to do the brave thing, and love each other and be there for each other, even when it's scary, even when you don't know what's going to happen.
Bonjour, je suis Julien.
Bonjour, je suis Thomas.
Nous sommes les cofondateurs de Rundisk et nous sommes ici pour vous parler de Chants of Scénar.
Avec Chant of Scénar, nous avons voulu proposer une aventure originale basée sur le mythe de Babel.
On a essayé de vous plonger dans la peau d'un voyageur qui débarquerait dans un pays complètement inconnu.
Tout au long de son ascension, le joueur va rencontrer 5 peuples différents. Chaque peuple a ses propres coutumes, sa propre histoire et évidemment sa propre langue.
Comme chacun de ces peuples parle des langues différentes, ça fait des siècles qu'ils ne se comprennent plus. Une partie du jeu et de l'aventure va consister à comprendre les raisons de cette division et peut-être essayer de rétablir l'harmonie dans la tour. Quand on a compris qu'on voulait travailler sur les langues, on a eu cette idée de s'inspirer de la tour de Babel, parce que c'est un mythe qui est très puissant, qui parle des hommes qui essayaient d'atteindre le ciel en construisant une gigantesque tour. Et ça a déplu aux dieux qui ont décidé de les frapper d'une malédiction, en leur faisant tous parler une langue différente. Ce qui est important et original dans le jeu, c'est que les langues sont des puzzles en soi. Pour nous, un mot c'est pareil qu'un levier, une porte, une clé. On comprend des langues en résolvant des puzzles, et résoudre des puzzles nous permet de comprendre des langues.
Chant of Scénar est avant tout un jeu d'aventure. Au-delà de l'aspect puzzle, le joueur devra explorer l'environnement, interagir avec différents personnages et participer à des scènes d'action et d'infiltration.
Donc on a eu cette idée de créer un héros qui serait plus un traducteur, un diplomate, un scientifique quelque part et qui soit dans cette démarche de réconciliation. Le personnage lui-même n'est pas un personnage violent, c'est pas un personnage fort, c'est pas un guerrier. Il va s'en sortir, il va trouver les clés autrement que par la violence. C'est important pour nous de montrer ça, puisque quelque part, ce qu'on essaie de montrer dans le jeu, ce qu'on essaie en tout cas de dire dans le jeu, c'est que la violence n'est pas forcément le moyen de tout résoudre. Les inspirations artistiques du jeu, elles se trouvent principalement dans la bande dessinée européenne des années 70-80, puis plus tard, on a élargi les inspirations du jeu, on a convoqué le brutalisme, l'architecture mauresque, l'architecture indienne, et c'est ce qui nous a permis de créer ce monde un peu pluriel.
Chant of Scénar est une invitation au voyage, à la tolérance et à l'ouverture sur les autres.
D'ordinaire, les langues étrangères sont vues comme un frein. C'est d'ailleurs pour ça qu'on parle de barrière de la langue. Mais dans Chant of Scénar, ce contexte est voué à être dépassé puisque les langues y sont à la fois l'obstacle et la solution. On espère que vous aurez du plaisir à découvrir la tour, à résoudre ses mystères et à nous aider à réunifier ces peuples.
Et évidemment, nous avons hâte d'avoir vos retours.
Nightscape is a 2.5D atmospheric adventure game where the ancient Arabian night sky loses its light.
You play as Layla, who is an astronomer who just loves to look at the night sky.
As Layla, players wield a magical astrolabe, restoring stars back to constellations in order to seek a path home. A key stellar cast member is the Goat Kid constellation. The Goat Kid decides to accompany Layla in her journey.
These days, people do not know much about constellations and the stories behind them, especially Arabic constellations.
They're different from the Western or the Greek constellations. And so we've had a big research task finding out what those constellations mean, what the backstories are, and finding out how we can turn those ideas into gameplay elements.
The importance of the sky is having this sky-ground connection. Having Layla use the constellation's abilities to solve puzzles and help with Layla in defeating enemies.
The game being 2.5D, you can actually walk into the screen. There's a lot there that allow them to make the game very cinematic.
This is a brand new experience for me, building a team from the ground up. We found an amazing level designer in Nabil and a coder in Idris. And very recently we found our technical artist in Zaki, and those three are the powerhouse of the studio. And I think it's really genuinely amazing that we found those guys who are willing to work with us in Doha. I was very unsure about the amount of talent for making video games in the Middle East. And I think we got super lucky finding the team that we did.
For me, it all starts with a story and pictures that triggers my imagination. It triggered immediately some music in my mind. Beautiful Middle Eastern melodies to take them in, the makams, to combine them with harmonies, Western influences as well, that it comes together as a blend.
In my mind, designing sound is a bit like playing with clay, like trying to model this clay, this sound, manipulate, edit, cut. For example, the hook shot is mostly made by a tree branch, the footstep of a scorpion walking, which is a mix of knife and stone. The voice of a scorpion is my voice, actually. And then overly processed. When the scorpion attack, when the scorpion died, attack, that's my voice.
We're trying really hard to make the game feel magical, particularly the parts where the player is trying to figure out the puzzles.
Being in a country like the Philippines where my hometown had about zero pollution, so looking at the stars was one of my hobbies, which is why Nightscape appealed to me a lot.
There's about 65 million people in the MENA region who play games, and there's a very, very sparse amount of content being developed from within. We want to push that boundary, and we want to create fun and meaningful games with the Middle East in mind, utilizing its culture and rich traditions and history to really inspire ideas for games going forward. And ultimately build a bridge towards understanding the Middle East better.
is it just me? Everything I set upon unravels at my feet. Everything I've learned wasted on a girl who doesn't know how to be free.
The games industry is always absolutely convinced that we can only be this and this only until someone comes along and proves them wrong.
Stray Gods is a role-playing musical where you control the song. You play as Grace, a college dropout who's not quite sure what to do with her life.
A woman living in the modern world who encounters the last of the Greek muses.
Calliope?
Who dies in her arms, passes on her powers, and Grace discovers that the Greek gods are alive and well and hidden in the modern world.
We think that Stray Gods kind of appeals beyond just fans of video games. It's a really unique story and a unique experience.
There are so many elements that go into this game to make it special that you can attach to any one of them and have an incredible experience.
Stray Gods is what we call a role-playing musical. It's not really a genre that's ever existed before.
You say you didn't kill Calliope. You have 1 week to prove it. What do I do?
Start singing.
This is a game with branching musical numbers where the key decisions in the story are made in musical numbers that change depending on your choices.
Lost girls, lost girls.
The way that we tackle music is one that people have never seen before.
Boarding multiple branching paths that should link up to each other. There's a lot of considerations to factor in.
It's very complicated, but it feels very worth it in the end.
Perfectly fine on her own.
We got to work with some of the best, the most talented voice actors in the world, the most talented people on Broadway. Like, what more could you ask for, really?
Being able to work with some champions like Austin Wintory, David Gator, Troy Baker has been nuts.
At the end of the day, it came down to our composer, Austin. He works some kind of dark magic and you get it all back and you're like, don't know how you transformed that take into this, but it's absolutely amazing.
You'll have to see. You'll have to see.
We have such incredibly complex, thoughtful characters in this game. Every single character in the game has the potential to be a favorite.
My favorite character is Eros.
I really love Aphrodite. I think she is beautiful.
Oh no, that's too hard of a question.
My favorite character is, I think, Orpheus.
My king, Orpheus. He's my favorite. It used to be Hermes, but Orpheus, emo king, love.
Look at me, who do you think I am? I'm saying Medusa. I am the #1 Medusa fan in the office.
I love Medusa, and I love Persephone, and I adore Freddie. But my favorite?
I reckon my favorite character is Freddie.
I'm really going to go against the grain here. My favorite character is Freddie.
Everybody's going to say Freddie, so I thought I'd say someone else as well.
But my favorite... Oh, yeah, I'll say Freddie. But Medusa and Calliope and Persephone. It's really hard. Sorry.
There is a level of belief in the studio in the themes in this game and the stories that it's trying to tell and the people it's trying to involve and the people it's trying to talk to that I haven't seen on a lot of the games that I've worked on in my career.
We've assembled this superstar group of people. It is a Voltron of game development.
Early on, Liam made a conscious effort to make sure that everyone that we hired culturally fit, but also had a conscious effort to make sure that we weren't hiring the same kind of people.
Every single person who came onto this project brought something wholly and uniquely theirs.
It's one thing to be able to hire to have diverse voices. It's also another thing to make sure that those voices are heard. It's just important for us that everyone, one, feels safe enough to share their opinion, and two, diverse enough that many opinions are shared from all sorts of walks of life.
At the end of the day, gaming is about joy, and I really like being reminded that making games can also be about joy.
Lost in a moment.
Very soon,
Lost in a moment.
the idols will be no more.
Lost in a moment.
The Expanse is an exceptional intellectual property in that it's huge and that the characters are the forefront of what they are focusing on.
What is so compelling about it is that it works in several different mediums, right? I mean, we began with the books. And then I think what was so special about the television show was that it was almost like just another window of looking in at this same story.
So what's unique about the way that we tell stories is that we give our players agency over the character they're playing, which basically means that their choices shape the overall story, so they're actually living in the story as opposed to just following along with it.
When you're adapting a television property into a video game property, you have to think about what the fan is expecting and when they're coming into. This takes place years before the first season. We're getting to see the world through Kamina Drummer's eyes. She is a belter, somebody who's out in deep space and has grown up there, has never set foot on a planet, so her perspective is really different.
It's hard for me to look at these moons without thinking about the Earther research colonies exploiting all the resources on them and giving nothing to the belt.
I hoped to portray her, especially at the beginning of the video game, as a little bit more vulnerable and open and to see the events that cause her to harden.
Just like Ceres, bossing everyone around, only this time no dolls to keep you on the leash, yeah?
A really awesome character like Drummer deserves to have really interesting situations to be put in that fans have come to expect from the show, and now it's like they're getting to play an episode of The Expanse, but in video game form. We can do things like put zero-G in the game, but we have to think about it from what's a good interaction medium, and changing that from what you may have seen in the show slightly to make sure that it's something that you can grok immediately and that feels good on the sticks, but that is also representative of what you see in the show. Those characters have really complex issues that they're facing regularly, and in narrative games, we want to give players these gray areas to really think, is this the answer I wanted to choose, or do I want to choose this answer? And that they both have their upsides and their downsides. And so The Expanse is perfect for that.
Drummer, his suit is punctured and losing pressure. You need to release the vault and patch him now or he could die.
Belay that. That vault has O2, fuel, armaments. We can't afford to lose it.
It was a really interesting challenge to come at the same character in a completely different medium.
Deck 9 is a video game studio. We are known for our narrative, our characters, and our motion capture technology.
It's a completely blank white room. You've got some tape on the floor, maybe a few things made out of wire to show where a door frame might be or something like that, but otherwise it's pure imagination.
I assume you didn't come here to talk about crystals.
We have a new target.
What is it this time, El Dorado? The Fountain of Youth? Let me guess. The Falcon Horde of Venus?
The UNN Urshanabi. Cap believes there's something valuable on board.
Something that we are really excited for people to experience in the Expanse of Telltale series is the emotional performance that we're getting from our actors that comes through with our technology, and from our animators that really bring out the personality in these characters.
I work for you, but you don't own me.
Believe me, I'm well aware.
Just want to make sure you're not having second thoughts about our deal.
Oh, come on. We're equal partners. We pay the crew, the costs, and the overhead.
The rest is 50-50. You and me.
I mean, that's the joy and the beauty of a job like this, is that I get to play.
We're hoping that you form these bonds with these characters and that they are something that you carry with you after you're done playing the game and you're thinking about it later. That, to me, is always a testament of good storytelling is, am I thinking about it long after I experienced the game itself?
I am Julian Cordero, and I'm the lead developer and programmer in Despelote. Despelote is a game about soccer, and it's a slice-of-life adventure game set in 2001. when Ecuador was really close to qualifying to the World Cup for the first time. Everybody was incredibly excited about this moment, and you see it through the eyes of an 8-year-old kid kicking a ball around with your friends in the park.
¿Vamos a jugar?
When I was growing up, I played a lot of soccer. In Ecuador, the culture of soccer is very big, and if you're a boy and you're not playing soccer, it's like hard to make friends. A lot of like my best friends I made were through playing soccer. But then when I moved to the US, I wasn't really watching or playing soccer for a few years. That sort of made me like take a step back from it. I sort of like realized this, and I was like, oh, like this had such a big role in my life. I wanted to make this game to sort of like figure out what it was that was really interesting about soccer growing up. When I started making the game, the first thing I focused on was this like relationship with the ball, and like making the ball like this physical object that you're kicking around. More than like creating like a soccer match, I knew that I wanted to just like your relationship with the ball and like how that sort of then relates to your environment. Immediately was thinking, okay, what should it look like? And there was this artist and musician, Sebastián. I really liked his work.
My name is Sebastián Balbuena, and I am in charge of the art in Despelote. That includes 2D animation, 3D modeling, and also the music. This is actually the first video game I have ever worked in.
I knew the game was going to be in 3D because I wanted the game to be like feel very physical, and this like the physical connection with the ball.
We wanted to find a graphic style that could communicate emotions, and we found that the 2D hand-drawn animation was the best way to do that.
We developed like the art style sort of around like his previous work, and his style sort of feels very nostalgic to us to have these like backgrounds with this like very grainy aesthetic. That was just very important to have that dynamic. The background being so noisy, the characters being so like hand-drawn and like so clean. As soon as like I was like, okay, well, what's the setting for this game? Like the only really idea I had was like where I have played soccer in my life, which is in Quito. That's where the game sort of had to be set. It became really important for us to like capture Quito in a way that was like very true to us. So we're using a lot of pictures, and the buildings are all real buildings.
Some of the voices are from people that we knew. We wanted to have the same feeling that you get when you listen to people's conversation in the street. So that's why we went with the improvisation for the dialogue.
It's all improvised, really. We like approached a lot of friends and family in Ecuador. The parents are played by my own parents, so there's an interesting dynamic happening there as you run around as a kid. The scene we set is it's 2001. Ecuador is just coming out of this big economic crisis, and there's this idea we can qualify to the World Cup, and that's like really exciting. And it's been great because I think it's bringing in a lot of this like sort of communal understanding of the moment. So my parents aren't really big soccer people, but the excitement of qualifying to the World Cup was so big that even they were really excited about it.
Oiga, ya está jugando el Ecuador, vamos a ver. Todo el mundo está hablando de que este sí hay chance.
Capturing this moment in time was important because I think for my generation, the first time we qualified to the World Cup, it sort of meant like, oh, Ecuador is a tiny little country, but all of a sudden we were like in the world stage, and we were like playing against Italy, and like we were like in the big newspapers, and that felt like a really big thing. Pelota in Spanish means ball, and despelote is sort of a saying that people have. It's like, esto está hecho un despelote, is like, this is a mess. So it's sort of like a play on words, like ball and like mess. We're growing up with this idea of si se puede, which is what the people chant to the soccer team, which means, yeah, we can do it. Si se puede and si se pudo, like we can do it, and we already did it. Like that's not something my parents were able to like grow up with. People like grasped onto it so much, and I think it like really gave a lot of people so much hope. And I think for me, like that being like one of my earliest memories, it sort of made me grow up thinking like, oh yeah, like, yes, we can. I hope that people really enjoy just running around in Quito. I think we've built it in a way that is based on a lot of our memories. Instead of like trying to recreate it directly one-to-one, it's more of like a fuzzy memory. And I hope that feels very like transportive for people, and they can experience what this moment in time in Ecuador was. and how I felt through that time.
Ese Caviedes, ahí está sacándose la camiseta.